Happy Tuesday and welcome back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I am your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider Jake Ignaszewski, and I'll be flying solo today as we're going to be recapping the Twins and Red Sox game that happened yesterday, where the Red Sox lost the fourth game of the four-game series against Minnesota 8-3. Then we'll be also looking into how the Red Sox have sort of struggled and looking at what points or what places that they have struggled. And I'll be giving my opinion on how I think they could fix those specific things. And then we'll also be previewing the Toronto Blue Jays series that the Red Sox will be playing over the next 3 days at Fenway Park. But let's get into this episode of the Locked On Red Sox podcast.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So I hope everybody did enjoy Patriots Day today, whether you watched the Boston Marathon or you watched the Red Sox early game. I don't know about you guys, but if you can see me, if you're watching the YouTube version, I got my yellow City Connect shirt on, but I love the jersey that the Red Sox wear specifically on Patriots Day with the Be Strong patch as well as with the Boston across the front with those white slick jerseys. And we saw them sort of struggle today, not only offensively, but also pitching wise. We saw Rich Hill on the bump for the Red Sox, which in my opinion, you can't really give him too much criticism for his performance today after, 2 days ago, his dad unfortunately passed away. And Rich decided that he wanted to, stick with his scheduled start yesterday. Things didn't really go his way, allowing 4 earned runs over 4 2/3 innings, 6 hits, 2 walks, and 2 strikeouts. And we saw him surrender 2 2-run home runs, one to Kyle Garlick in the first inning, and then one in the third inning to Jorge Polanco. And one thing that I think he really struggled with was not allowing his breaking balls to get too much in the zone. We saw Dennis Eckersley point that out early in the game, and then ultimately it came back to bite him in the butt on that Jorge Polanco home run, which ultimately went over the monster and was hit off of a breaking ball. But we also saw him have a few control issues later on in his start. But one thing that, I've echoed on this podcast, especially last week after Rich Hill struggled a little bit, is we need to remember he's the oldest guy in the major leagues. He's also a fifth starter for the Red Sox. So you can't really, get too much on him. He's a fifth starter. You're not going to rely on him to only surrender 1 to 2 runs. Obviously you want that. Everybody wants that. But when you're a fifth starter and you're in your 42 age season, it's not like you're going to expect him to go out there and give you 5 scoreless innings or anything like that. But we also saw Cutter Crawford come out of the bullpen, struggle a little bit, pitching 1 2/3 innings, 2 hits, allowing 4 earned runs, 5 walks, and 2 strikeouts. And you can sort of see from those 5 walks on his pitching line that he had massive control issues. We saw him come in the 7th inning and also pitch the 8th inning. And ultimately at that time, the Red Sox were only losing by 2 runs. It was a 4-2 ball game. It was a very easy game for them to come back in. And, they also had tons of opportunities, which I'll talk about later in this episode, where they could have come back, but, they just did not come up clutch when it mattered with runners in scoring position. But as I mentioned, we saw Cutter Crawford walk multiple guys, 5 to be specific. And there was even a few times during that 8th inning where he walked guys on 4 straight pitches. Ultimately, during that 8th inning, he did strike out 1 after he walked 2 guys in a row. But then we saw him throw 2 wild pitches, and some of them, at some points you can say, it's the catcher's fault for not being able to fully block it. But, the Red Sox have one of the best defensive catchers back there in Christian Vasquez. And when you see Cutter Crawford throw 2 balls into the ground and they ultimately bounce off of Vasquez's pads. You kind of got to blame it on the pitcher not being able to throw a catchable ball in that moment in time. And we ultimately saw a few of those mistakes, walking guys as well as with those two wild pitches, ultimately lead the score to be 7-2 in that eighth inning. Then we saw Sawamura ultimately come in for the Sox and then ultimately let up one more run to make it 8-2. But one thing I'm thinking about with Cutter Crawford is we've seen this happen to him before. It happened only a few days ago against the Detroit Tigers. He allowed 3 runs, but something that we still need to remember is he's still a rookie. He's going to have these rookie struggles. And one thing that I'm curious about is how much longer will the Red Sox see what he can really do at the major league level until they ultimately send him down. You got to remember that Josh Taylor's working his way back down in Worcester right now, made a few rehab appearances so far. And it will be interesting to see who really the Red Sox swap out when Taylor is ready to be slotted right back into that bullpen role. And we've also seen a guy, an old name like Darwin Hernandez, who I was kind of surprised that he didn't make it on the 28-man roster. But I understand that the Red Sox wanted to send him down to Worcester to work on some of his control issues that we've seen him have over the last 2 years. But he's looked lights out for the Red Sox, pitching in 8 2/3 and only allowing 1 hit, allowing 2 earned runs. And as I mentioned, he had some control issues, but he's only allowed 4 walks over 8 innings so far. And, one number that, is very impressive is that he struck out 14 batters. So he's dominating down in AAA. So how much longer are you going to wait to see what Darwinson can do before you ultimately call him up? And how much of a leash are you really going to give Cutter Crawford to continue to have some of these rookie struggles? Because obviously it's nice to have a guy like Crawford in there who can pitch multiple innings, but when you're not going to be reliable out of the bullpen, you're essentially going to kind of what he did today, blow up the game to where it's kind of out of reach and tough for the Red Sox to come back. How much longer are you going to allow a guy to stay in the majors until you ultimately send him down so he can continue to work on stuff? But some other things that will be interesting to see how the Red Sox ultimately do in this Toronto series is how are they going to do with runners in scoring position? As I mentioned, they were 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position specifically today. They also struck out 12 total times. And we've seen the offense be very, very inconsistent so far for the Red Sox. Some games they'll score 8 runs for you. Some games they'll look like they did today where they only score 3. But we saw the Red Sox also have 11 hits in total today. And when you get 11 hits, it's and only score 3 runs. It's showing that you don't have guys in that lineup that are going to be that are coming up clutch when there is runners in scoring position, and that seems to have been a really big struggle for the Red Sox so far in 10 games. But I'm going to look more into some specific guys that have been struggling for the Red Sox offense, and then also previewing the Toronto Blue Jays series in our second segment. But I just want to take a second to talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the MLB season on BetOnline. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I also want to thank you guys so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On Now podcast. It recaps every single MLB game with analysis from your local experts, and it takes fans through the season like no other network. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So now I sort of wanted to go into who's been struggling specifically throughout the last 10 games, and then also how did they do today. So we saw some batters really come up clutch today, specifically Xander Bogaerts. He was 3 for 5 with an RBI, and in that 6th inning the Red Sox had a great opportunity to creep back in this game. It was a 4-2 game. We saw Xander on second, Devers on third, and JD Martinez came up and, he half swung at a ball, which was right back to the pitcher. And Ultimately, Devers got caught into a pickle, which was the second out of that inning. But then we also saw in that same inning, bases were loaded. Christian Arroyo was up with 2 outs, and he ultimately flew out to center field to end the rally for the Red Sox. But it was a perfect opportunity in that sixth inning. All Arroyo had to do was hit a single up the middle. You could even say the same thing with JD in the situation where Devers was on third, Xander was at second. All you got to do is hit a ball up the middle or get a single and 2 runs score. And, it's a tie ball game. But, that's something that has been so tough for the Red Sox, it seems like, so far this season, is that they're leaving runners on base in the most important times. And especially when they struggled in the second half last season in August as well as in September. That was something that we saw time and time again, is that they were leaving so many runners on base and just squandering so many great opportunities to where they ultimately could have either tied the game or take the lead. And, when you have those situations come up, you gotta take advantage of them and come up clutch. But, some guys like JD Martinez, he just has not been coming up clutch when the Red Sox need it. And, he's that big bat in that lineup. Obviously they got Devers, Bogey, and now Trevor Story. But, in that 4 or 5 spot, JD Martinez is that guy that the Red Sox sort of rely on to continue the spark of the offense and, drive in those runs when they need it. But, so far this season has batted 243, specifically in this game. Yesterday, he was 1 for 5, striking out twice. We also have seen Christian Arroyo really not play too well so far, specifically at the plate, batting 176. Last game, in yesterday's game, he was 1 for 4 with a strikeout. And I was really hoping and praying and rooting for Christian Arroyo this season. When he is finally healthy, when he can show what he can do, that we'd be able to see him, step up to the plate and really show that he deserves to be on this Red Sox team and that he can really make an impact. We've seen him do it a little bit, not really too much, because he's either injured or he's got COVID. That's sort of what happened last season. But with runners in scoring position, specifically today, we didn't see him come up big with the bases loaded. And I'm hoping he can really start to pick things up, because I love him on the team. I love the energy that he brings to this roster. And he's a great utility guy, but we just got to get that bat working. Another guy who's really struggled, who we thought was starting to catch his stride at the plate, is Kiki Hernandez. And we saw him have an 0 for 5 game yesterday and strike out 3 times. And so far he's batting 163. And one thing that I've noticed with this Red Sox offense so far is that they're getting down in the count a lot. And that forces them to either protect the plate, obviously protect the play when it's like 1-2 or 0-2. But, when that happens, they have to chase or swing at bad pitches. And that ultimately leads to either strikeouts, groundouts, or flyouts. And it just doesn't seem like, some of these guys, specifically like Kike and JD, they're going up to the plate confident. They're going up to the plate ready to make an impact and get a hit. And we're sort of seeing them get down in the count and then, hit the ball very weakly, which ultimately leads to, some of those weak fly balls or those grounders. And, another guy that we've seen really struggle, who I'm surprised, he even made the 28-man roster, is Travis Shaw. So far in 7 appearances, he hasn't gotten a hit yet. He's struck out 4 times, and specifically yesterday, we saw him go 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. And it just makes me wonder, how much longer are the Red Sox going to see what Travis Shaw can do for this team, and how long are they going to wait until they ultimately send him down? We've seen a guy like Frenchie Cordero really play well so far in Worcester for the Woo Sox, batting .348 over 11 games, hitting 3 home runs with 18 RBIs. And I understand why they have Shaw up there, to be able to switch him out and platoon him with Dalbec, and why they put Franchi down in Worcester, so then he can work on sort of being a better hitter at the plate, not striking out as much, and some of the struggles that we've seen him have at the major league level. But there starts to also get to a point where we start to see a guy struggle so much that you sort of need to send him down to sort of get his confidence back up so he can work on some things. And, I think Frenchie Cordero would definitely be, or also Yomer Sanchez, you could say as well, could be a two great candidates to replace Travis Shaw if he continues to struggle. But also a few other guys that we saw play very well for the Red Sox yesterday in that Twins game. Alex Verdugo is continuing to hit the ball very well. We saw him hit a home run 2 days ago for the Red Sox, and his bat is continuing to be very, very hot. Was 2 for 3 with a walk in yesterday's game. And then we also saw Christian Vasquez start to pick up his bat a little bit. He's another guy who has struggled so far to start the season. He was 2 for 4 in yesterday's game against the Twins, hitting a home run to give the Red Sox their third run of that game. He also had 2 RBIs as well. But to be able to win ball games, the Sox are going to have to take advantage with runners in scoring position. They're going to have to protect the plate a lot more, not strike out as much. As I said before, when you have 12 strikeouts and you're 2 for 12 with runners in scoring position, that's not really a recipe to win a game. And ultimately, we saw that really hurt the Red Sox in this Twins series. Splitting the 4-game series with the Twins, but now they're really going to have to sort of learn from what didn't go well in the Twins series and apply that and improve for this next series against the Toronto Blue Jays. They're a team who are 6-4 going into this series against the Red Sox. But I'm going to go more into previewing this next series with the Toronto Blue Jays in our next segment of the Locked On Red Sox podcast. But I just want to talk to you about Rock Auto. So with the ever-changing, increasing makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And why wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts you need on their computer, but also choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket. So save time and money by using Rock Auto. And why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? For example, with a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, it's $353 from your chain store, but from Rock Auto, it's $216. That's definitely a great deal. And something else that Rock Auto has that no other auto parts store does is reliably low prices for every single customer. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So now looking at this Blue Jays series, the Blue Jays so far, they've been living up to sort of the expectations that they had at the start of the season. They were like sky high going into the 2022 season for this Blue Jays team, specifically because of the moves that they made, signing Kevin Gausman, as well as trading for Matt Chapman. And also with how young and exciting this team is. They were so close to making the playoffs last season, just barely didn't make it in that heated wild card battle that was at the end of the 2021 season. But looking at so far, they just played very well against the Oakland A's. They have a 6-4 record so far, and looking at to start tomorrow's game, Nathan Eovaldi on the mound against Kikuchi, and then we're also going to be seeing Nick Pivetta try and perform a little bit better than he did in his very underwhelming start on the home opener, where he only pitched 2 innings and ultimately allowed 5 runs. He's going against Jose Barrios in the second game against the Blue Jays. And then in the third game, we're going to see Kevin Gausman against Tanner Houck. But really looking at this Blue Jays team so far, we haven't really seen some of the guys who are so good for this lineup really being able to perform to their high potential. We've seen Vladimir Guerrero continue his success at the plate. We already sort of expected that, but guys like Matt Chapman, who's in his first year in Toronto and just recently got traded from the Oakland A's, he's only batted .226 so far this season, homering twice, having 7 RBIs, but we've seen him strike out a lot. We've seen him strike out 11 times, over 7 hits. Another guy who struggled a little bit, as well as a guy like Bo Bichette, batting .222 so far in 10 games, only homering once and driving in 1 run. But another guy to keep your eye on is a guy like George Springer, who, he's finally on the field for the Blue Jays. And it always seems like anytime he's on the field for Toronto, and in the lineup, they play much, much better. And that's definitely shown, batting .268, 2 home runs with 5 RBIs. But the Red Sox are really going to have very reliable pitching against this lineup, especially when you're playing at Fenway Park. This lineup feeds on Fenway Park and that left field monster. And so they're going to have really reliable pitching out of the rotation as well as out of the bullpen. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how guys like Eovaldi and Pivetta, who have struggled a little bit to start the season, really perform against this really high-powered Blue Jays offense. But, as well as we got to see the Red Sox offense sort of show what they got. Both of these offenses, in my opinion, are 2 top 5 offenses in the entire league. So, this is going to be an offensive showdown. And, both pitching staffs haven't really played up to their potential or to really what the teams have really expected. So we can see these games be very highly scored. And it's going to come down to how the bullpens in pitching rotations really perform. And I think that's really what it's going to come down to. But I'm super excited for this series. I hope you guys are as well. I want to hear what you guys think going into this Blue Jays 3-game series on our Twitter. If you haven't followed us over there, it's LO_Red Sox. We post Red Sox content every single day, so go and make sure to follow us over there. Also follow myself on Twitter. It's at Jake Iggy, as well as my co-host Lauren. It's at that's 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. So I greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to this episode of the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And also make sure to check out all the other Locked On podcasts that there are on this network. Everybody does an amazing job of keeping you updated with your favorite teams. And also, make sure to check out Locked On Red Sox 5 days a week. We post Monday through Friday to keep you updated and knowledgeable about your favorite team. But I can't wait for this next week and this next series against the Toronto Blue Jays. And I'm going to be keeping you guys updated throughout this week. Lauren is going to be going away, so you're stuck with me and my great opinions. So get excited, everybody. But as always, greatly appreciate everybody supporting the podcast and for listening to this episode of the Locked On Red Sox podcast. And I'll see you guys and talk to you guys tomorrow. But lastly, let's go Sox.